Predictive policing was once full of promises that have not been fulfilled as issues arise and many police forces abandon the approach. Our EU-funded research project, Cutting Crime Impact, is helping 2 law enforcement agencies to tackle some of the issues with predictive policing and develop some practical answers. This has involved asking the question, what is the role of predictive policing in modern policing? I'm Professor Caroline Davey from the University of Salford, the coordinator of the Cutting Crime Impact project. The Landeskriminalamt, in English, that's the State Office for Criminal Investigation in the federal state of Lower Saxony in Germany, introduced their own predictive policing system, Premap, in 2016. I'm joined by Max Querbach from the LKA. Max, can you tell us a little bit about the introduction of predictive policing in Lower Saxony and what your research found regarding its use in policing?
Yes, thank you, Caroline, for introducing. We started, as you just said, our predictive policing approach with an in-house development due to the current development over the globe with predictive policing in 2016. As I said, it was an in-house development because we didn't want to purchase an externally developed black box by a company. And we want to have, the power over the data and what is happening and with all the data and everything. So the main focus of the Premap system is basically based on a near repeat approach. It predicts only domestic burglary crimes and only police data from domestic burglary is implemented in our police case management system are used for the predictions, and the main factors are like time, location, the type of intrusion, stolen goods, whatsoever, and on the basis of that it is predictive to what likelihood another burglary will happen in the next 24 to 48 hours, and based on that it is tried to tackle those predictions with adequate measures like focused patrolling in those areas like risk areas, and the risk areas are of radius of 500 meters, not squares where it's or grids. Most of the other systems use that. We use like a circle. Yeah, it's a prediction within a circle based around that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you undertook research on how Premap was actually being used by police officers as part of the Cutting Crime Impact project. What did you find as a result of that research?
Yeah, first, Premap was evaluated before, but not in the type how it was implemented or how it was used in the daily policing practice. It was more used on how the algorithm was working and how the risk areas are predicted and everything, the value of it, of the predictions, who was, not that satisfying as anyone thought, before they developed it. It was a lot of hope in the new development of this technology. And as we began our CCI project and looking for developing like tailored toolkits for bringing predictive policing to another level, specifically in Lower Saxony, and develop like toolkits just for us based on our current situation. I undertook observations during patrol with patrol officers and interviewed also different people involved in the implemented Premap process. Like we defined roles during implementation of Premap for officers and for the precinct who are responsible for some parts of the whole process. So I interviewed them how it was implemented and also how officers use it in their daily work. And the results were really eye-opening, to be honest, because you think you roll out new technology and people just apply it into their daily work. And the thing is, that's basically not what happened. A lot of people had some issues with the whole usability because it was mainly developed for using it on tablets within their cars. It's just actually it's just a map on which you can see the defined risk areas. A lot of officers said that it's not user friendly, that they don't really use it at all because they don't need it in their car to see where the risk area is. They just need, before they shift, a notification within your patrolling area. In this specific area, there is a risk area, patrol there. There was also other problems concerning data values, how data was implemented into Premap, but also that people, especially officers from patrol, didn't see any benefit of the whole approach, because they thought the effectiveness couldn't be measured, which is a general problem in predictive policing. And I think one of the main problems was for officers that they don't get any feedback out of the program. When you patrol to a risk area and nothing happens, you can't really measure if it didn't happen because you patrolled there or the prediction was just wrong. So that was one main issue, but there was also no really communication flow, even though the Premap was implemented with a overall structure and how it should be communicated down to the patrol officers. But the thing is that it was really depending on individual preferences of people in charge, how patrol officers got their information about risk areas and how people were briefed about in general crime information, crime incidents, prediction areas, whatsoever. And so we saw a general lack there, that there was no standardization of communicating crime data, prediction data. And then the problem was, after it first was launched, it never gotten really implemented. Just some few officers who were interested in it looked at it and used it, and some didn't. So that was a really major lag, I guess, that it was no overall structured implementation and process of communicating every data they needed.
Thank you, Max. I mean, implementation there seems to be a really key issue. I mean, what's interesting is that predictive policing is often actually a commercial product that law enforcement agencies are expected to invest in, but then they actually fail to implement. Why is that? I coordinate Cutting Crime Impact together with Andrew Wootton. He's a product designer and adopts a human-centered design approach to product and service development. Andrew, can you provide some insight into this?
Hi, Caroline. I think that the problem is that too often the technologies are not actually designed per se. They embody a particular technological capability, in this case, the ability to map data or to plot crime data and risk onto maps. And often the solutions lack an appropriate design consideration of the real world context. So how they will actually be used, in this case, within a policing context and all of the other pressures that fall on the officers and the responsibilities they have. But equally, how will these technologies be fed with relevant and accurate data? So too little consideration is often given to the accuracy and the consistency of the data that's fed into the system by the human users, and also how human users interpret and understand the outputs of such systems, and how these outputs will actually be used. presenting the data on a map means automatically human users will make assumption about accuracy that may actually be unfounded. So if you only have postcode data, presenting it as dots on maps or locations on maps, people will automatically think that that's an actual physical location in real in geographical space, when that might not actually be the case. And we find that this is happening, what's happening currently in predictive policing, with so many police forces actually either questioning or stopping altogether using it, reflects more on a lack of a human-centered design approach to the adoption of the technology, rather than the technology being of no value in itself. So there needs to be more focus on how these technologies can be designed to actually support the police officers who are responsible for policing and for preventing crime, rather than in some way to replace them in some way, or to replace some aspect of their role, with the technology being seen as some sort of panacea or a magic wand in some way.
So Max talked about some real implementation issues at the LKA regarding predictive policing. Andrew, how did CCI help the LKA to address the issues identified from the research?
So CCI has been structured around the design development process. And this consists of several phases of divergent and convergent thinking. So at the start of the project, the first stage is the discover phase, where our police partners explored their focus areas using a range of different research methods. And the aim here is really to explore the subject, and is driven by curiosity rather than any agenda. And this is not as easy to do as it may sound. People naturally will cling to their initial assumptions about an issue, but by really exploring the area thoroughly and seeking to understand all the different perspectives involved, then you can develop valuable insights for the next phase, which is the define phase, which is actually convergent thinking. So you're looking to try and define the aim and the scope of the problem. And in many cases, this is where the focus of the project is actually redefined, and you discover that your initial assumptions of issues perhaps have been incorrect, or that the situation is more complex than you at first thought. And then, having defined the problem in this defined stage, you then set about with your design brief, starting the next phase, which involves divergent thinking again, as you explore different ways in which the solution to that brief might be developed. And this again involves research, including prototype testing of different ideas and talking to end users and other stakeholders. And then finally, in the deliver phase, you will deliver the design solution. So you're then focusing down convergent thinking on delivering the design solution and getting to a sort of final designed outcome. Then that is deployed in some way, and the impact and effectiveness of this is then digested over time. And then the principle is that this experience of using this solution that you've designed over time may in fact lead to another opportunity or problem that can be fed into the next sort of design cycle, if you like.
So Max, were your assumptions challenged through the CCI process? What was the design solution that you developed, and how does it meet the needs of the LKA?
Yes, I would totally say so, because what Andrew just described is with the things you think about before you actually develop something, that you already have the solution because of your profession, your assumptions, because of your knowledge of the things you work with. Before even the requirement capture phase, me and a colleague and some other colleagues sat together and already thought about the outcome of the project, you know, what would be the toolkit we needed, and we thought about a more sophisticated algorithm and whatsoever. And as I described before, that wasn't even the problem. Well, of course, it's a general problem with the predictions, as we know, and finding the right factors and the effectiveness of the whole approach. But what we experienced during the research phase here was that you can have the most sophisticated tool and technology whatsoever, if it's not rightfully implemented into an institution and its management and how the institution works, it's not gonna work at all, you know, because people are not going to use it at all, because they don't know how it works, they don't understand it, it's not communicated at all. And there is where we try to develop a process, like a communication process, in which predictive policing is just a part of a wider crime data or crime information communication process. So we developed, or we are currently developing a process in which we standardize the briefing, how patrol officers are briefed with relevant crime information, because like risk areas appear maybe once a week in your patrol area. So it's not like your daily business. There's a lot of other information you need for besides your professional individual knowledge. And we try to bring everything, the knowledge and the database from analytics and everything together into one place, so that patrol officers are briefed and informed properly. And this that our predictive policing approach is just one part in this whole process of information flowing through the whole institution. And that's what we're trying then to achieve, to make it one part of a general process.
Okay, thank you. Another aspect of CCI is its focus on social and ethical issues. With regard to predictive policing, a number of ethical issues have made headlines recently. We know that the LKO chose to develop its own predictive policing system as a way to mitigate some of these ethical issues. Dr. Oskar Gstrein from the University of Groningen has been exploring some of these issues. Oskar, perhaps you could give us some introduction to some of the issues that are relevant to predictive policing.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. And as you mentioned, as a partner of the Cutting Crime Impact project, we are responsible for ethical and social issues, but part of that is also, and I'd actually like to start with that aspect, the analysis of the legal framework as well. And as it's very well known for applications like predictive policing, which are often using large amounts of data or so-called big data to come up with predictions, there is first and foremost the issue that even although in Europe we have a very well evolved framework when it comes to issues like privacy or using data, where the basic rule is that you can only use data if you have a legitimate legal basis for that, even in that kind of environment, it's still very difficult to regulate the application and use of technologies like predictive policing, because then the legal framework simply hinges so much on the individual, and it's very difficult then to, on the one hand, have these like large amounts of data, and on the other hand, then operating in a legal framework that is so focused on the individual. And that is just to say that here in this area of application, really ethical and societal concerns count even more. And when it comes specifically to those, I mean, I think it has already been outlined very well by the speakers that we already heard, that on the one hand, there is this issue that the promise of the technology as such has underlying assumptions which just hold don't hold true when you try to actually really fight crime. So simply, crime is much more complex than just using, being able to predict it by using a lot of data and just putting it into a data model. And there are many reasons for that. One of those reasons could be that the people who are designing those systems, even when it's the police themselves, they have difficulties in really understanding how the reality then on the ground will look for the officers, or that the social factors which are impacting crime are just so much more complex that it's an impossible task to select the right data and combine it in the right way, maybe also with data which is not only related to crime or historic crime records like weather data or street patterns or things like that, and then bring all this together in a simple, so to speak, visualization, which then could help us telling agents, yes, on this day, under these conditions, you just need to go there, and let's say a burglary or a bicycle theft is going to happen. So that is the one aspect that just, it turns out more and more that the whole promise of the technology just doesn't hold true, because crime as a phenomenon seems to be too complex. On the other hand, what we heard, I think also very well, is that the implementation of such technologies and the use of this data in LEAs themselves is extremely complex. And what we see is that on the one hand, there are humans working who are using their experience and their skill sets and just their instincts to do what they think is best to handle the situations. And of course, data can play an enhancing role in that. We're not, absolutely don't have the opinion that there is not a role for data and technology to play in this, but we really have to think very carefully about how to do this. And I mean, Andrew has already outlined that, yeah, one way to integrate that is this human-centered design approach. But also, I think it helps just to think much more thoroughly about the purpose and the use of this data. And I think the design process that we're using in the CCI process, the CCI project, definitely helps with that.
Thank you. So thank you for joining me today. If you'd like to find out more about the CCI project, then please visit our website. That's www.cuttingcrimeimpact.eu. And thank you for listening, and goodbye.